and welcome to another of the E-Biology Teacher Podcasts. I'm Mr. Doc, and today we begin our study of animal organ systems, specifically with respect to the respiratory system. So everyone take a moment, take a deep breath, and now, since you know how good that feels, now we can appreciate why it feels so good. We're going to learn about that. We're going to learn why breathing is essential. We're going to learn how it works. We're going to take a specific human/mammalian approach to breathing because we're not going to get into animal lungs and that sort of thing. Or animal lungs, fish lungs, whatever. It's been a long day. Yeah. All right, let's get started. Let's get this show on the road. All right, here are our objectives of this podcast. We're going to describe the structures involved in breathing, and we're going to trace air through the body in terms of where it starts, where it ends up, and all that stuff. We're going to distinguish between two types of respiration, external and internal, and we'll tell you there's a little misnomer going on there because it can be confusing. And I'm going to explain to you how air is moved in and out of the lungs. This is not something that is as easy as you might think. I mean, when we think about moving food in and out of our bodies, that's pretty simple. But when we start talking about moving air in and out, that's a completely different process with completely different mechanisms and a completely different spin on things. So let's go ahead and get started. Breathing is the process of taking in essential gases and releasing waste gases from the body. Breathing, or respiration as it's called, is divided into two types: external respiration and internal respiration. Now, what I said earlier was that there's a misnomer here. When we hear the term external respiration, we think outside, and when we think internal respiration, we think inside. In fact, both of these respirations happen on the inside of the body. It is the main difference lies in where the air goes. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at each one of those specifically. External respiration is the exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the blood itself. Now, this process is primarily done in the lungs, but there are a lot of structures along the way that not only help it, but regulate it and enable it. So I think the best way to go about understanding this is to follow the air. We'll go through step by step. So to do that, we're going to take a look at both the anatomy and physiology of the respiratory system. All right? So the first thing we want to note is that air can enter two places in the body, either through the nose or through the mouth, right? Now, that means that we have a nasal cavity and we have a mouth cavity, which is commonly called the nasopharynx for the nose and the oropharynx for the mouth. The place where all of that air blends, ding, 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 that is called the pharynx. All right, the pharynx is the place where the nose air and the mouth air meet. It is also the structure of the human body that allows us to snort milk out of our nose when we're laughing while drinking milk. You see, if air from the nose and air from the mouth can mix, then fluid from the mouth can go up the nose, right? So what happens is in that space, air from the lungs goes forward, pushes the liquid up, past the oropharynx into the nasopharynx, and whoosh, milk waterfalls out the nostrils. All right. By the way, if you've ever done that with soda, it hurts. It's carbonation. All right. From the pharynx, the air is going to continue past a small structure called the epiglottis. Now, epi means to outside or to the side or to the top, and glottis refers to the opening of the trachea or windpipe. So the epiglottis is this little flap. It is not the little dangly thing in the back of your throat. Okay? That thing is the uvula. That is not the epiglottis. The epiglottis is a little flap. And if we have our tube or our trachea, the little flap covers it so that food and water don't get in there, or food or drink or whatever goes in there doesn't go in there, so that we don't suffocate or choke. Okay, so the epiglottis is just kind of a protective little floppy thing. Okay, it's a technical term, you should look it up. All right, so the epiglottis protects the opening of esophagus. The esophagus, listen to me, I told you it was a long day. The epiglottis protects the opening of the trachea. The epiglottis covers the opening of the trachea. All right, so the air is going to continue to move downward past a small cartilage box that we are going to call the larynx. All right, the larynx is, in fact, the voice box. Come on. Stop. Boom. All right. So the air enters the larynx or voice box. The voice box is actually a box, a cartilage box that's got membranes in it. And as air passes through those membranes, they vibrate, and the vibrations make sound. Hence, voice box. Now, if an organism has a voice box, it doesn't mean necessarily that it can talk. It just means that it can make sound. So the fetal pig that we will be dissecting later actually has a voice box because it goes, okay? Yeah, that was kind of creepy. Anyway, so that is this chunk of tissue here. It's a hard cartilage box. Now, larynx gives us the word laryngitis. And anytime we hear the word itis, what we want to think of is inflammation. Okay, so laryngitis is an inflammation or an irritation of the larynx. If the membranes that we were talking about start to swell, they won't vibrate as much, not as much sound. So when somebody has laryngitis, they sound like this because they can't get their larynx membranes to vibrate. Okay, kind of hurt. All right, now as we continue downward, we're going to go past the larynx. We're still in the trachea, the windpipe. It's eventually going to branch into two bronchi, okay? The bronchi are the tubes that split the trachea into the right lung and the left lung. Now, if you notice on our little picture here, we see the word left lung, but that's on your right. Well, that's because left is to the specimen's left, not the observer's left. So your left lung is, in fact, on your left, okay? Now, the bronchi are tubes leading to the lungs, and then the bronchi branch off into several smaller tubes called bronchioles. So basically we have the trachea, boop, bronchi, boop, and then bronchioles, okay? Little offshoots of that, right? And I know you're really impressed by my ability to draw. You should be. I'm like an undiscovered Michelangelo up in here. All right, so the bronchi branch off into many bronchioles. The next step in our little party here is to go to the alveolar sacs, okay? Now, the branches of the bronchioles lead to small air sacs called alveoli, depending on where you're from. The alveoli are surrounded by capillaries, or very, very, very tiny blood vessels. The alveoli fill up with oxygen-rich air from the atmosphere. Now, I want you to keep in mind, when we studied osmosis or diffusion, things move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So the alveolar sacs contain a high concentration of oxygen and a lower concentration of carbon dioxide. The blood in the capillaries is coming back from the body. It's picked up carbon dioxide from cellular respiration, and it wants to drop that off. So the blood itself has a high carbon dioxide content. So carbon dioxide is going to flow out of the capillaries and into the alveolar sacs, and oxygen is going to flow from the alveolar sacs into the bloodstream. And we have an exchange, which is exactly what we wanted, because the whole point is to get rid of carbon dioxide and to get oxygen. So that's what's happening at those alveolar sacs. So I don't have a picture on here for some reason. I could probably find one. But the alveolar sacs, you know, I'm going to do that. I'm going to find one while I'm sitting here talking to you. Oh, no! Here we go. Hold on one second. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to get you a picture of alveoli. I know I shouldn't be doing this on the internet, but, you know, that's why the internet was created. Okay, this is a good picture. Let's see a full-size image of this. All right, thank you, Google Images. Okay, this is a bronchiole. It has all these little sacs, these little alveolar sacs. Now, This is the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery is bringing blood that doesn't have a whole bunch of oxygen in it. It's got a whole bunch of carbon dioxide in it. And then the gas exchange happens, and then the capillaries turn into the pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein now has oxygen-rich blood. That's now going to go back to the heart, and the heart's going to circulate that blood. All right? Looks like little grapes, doesn't it? It's kind of cute. Okay, so that's how the alveolar sacs work. That's how oxygen is exchanged, and that is the process of external inspiration. But wait, Mr. Doc, that was all inside. Exactly, that's why I told you it was confusing. External respiration has to do with the exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the blood. We've done that. That's external respiration. Internal respiration now is the exchange of gases between the blood and the cells of the body. So let's take a look at that. Internal respiration is when oxygen-rich blood now takes that oxygen to the cells of the body that need it. And then the carbon dioxide in the cells is going to go to the blood, and the oxygen from the blood is going to go to the cells. That is internal respiration. Now, once that's happened, we're going to start this process over again, because now we have carbon dioxide-rich blood that needs to go to the lungs and pick up oxygen. In other words, the diffusion gradient, the concentration gradient, is now opposite. In the lungs, we had a lot of oxygen in the lungs, but not in the blood. We had a lot of carbon dioxide in the blood, but not the lungs. That's opposite now. Now the blood has a lot of oxygen, but the cells have a lot of carbon dioxide. So the gases are going to go the opposite way now, dropping off oxygen where it's needed and taking carbon dioxide away. It's brilliant, actually, if you think about it. So that's how internal respiration works. So if we need a way to remember it, external respiration happens from the mouth all the way down and primarily in the lungs. Internal respiration happens everywhere else. Okay, everywhere else, because every cell in your body needs oxygen. All right. Now, the way air gets into our body is a little bit different. Inspiration has nothing to do with my heart will go on and Titanic and making me cry and all that stuff. No, in fact, inspiration means to bring air in. And expiration doesn't mean that your milk has gone bad. It means that you're getting rid of air. Okay? So they are homonyms. They are two words that are spelled exactly the same but mean something else. Inspiration occurs when a muscle called the diaphragm, which sits just below the lungs, moves downward and contracts. This creates a vacuum. No, not the thing you put on your carpet and suck dirt up with. It creates an empty space where there is nothing. Okay? And what happens is gas wants to fill the vacuum. Okay? So when we open up an empty space, air is sucked into the lungs, but really what's happening is the air is flowing into the lungs, and the alveolar sacs will fill with gas. This is a passive process. We don't take air and stuff it into our nose or mouth trying to get air in. What happens is we contract our diaphragm and open up empty space. And the laws of physics notwithstanding, air is going to fill whatever space is empty. Since there's nothing, not even air in those spaces, air is going to flow into our mouth and nose and into our lungs. So I wish we had a model to show you that. And we do. Hello. Yes, this is the model of a lung. Let's put some perspective. This little hole is the trachea, your windpipe, right? The two little red balloons, Luftballons, are your lungs. This is your thoracic cavity, and this nice little thing is your diaphragm. Now I want you to watch what happens to the balloon when I contract my diaphragm. Woo! Ooh! Ooh! Right? They fill up with air. Now I'm not blowing air in here. Listen, air's sucking in because as I open space in the balloons, air fills them up. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Now, when I relax my diaphragm, it pushes the air back out. And this is how your lungs work. So, what about a collapsed lung, and how does that work? Or a pneumothorax, if you watch House or ER. This is a closed system. If air can get in anywhere else, it's going to, in which case it's not going to work. So if I puncture the system, the balloons will not inflate because air is filling the cavity and not the lungs, because the air is coming in here, not here, okay? Now, there are a couple of ways this can happen. If the actual cavity itself is breached, if the area where the air is going into the lungs is breached, or if the diaphragm is breached, all of these can cause a difference in pressure. Now, sometimes we have a minor breach in the lungs, in which case breathing is possible, but it's really labored, because as we're breathing, air is filling the cavity also. So it's putting pressure on the lungs, and it's not letting air fill in down the trachea. So those are some respiratory issues if you're medically minded. If the capsule that the lungs are in is compromised, then breathing is compromised. That's the ball game. All right. Now, I know we talked about inspiration and expiration. Let's go over expiration just a little bit more. All right. When the diaphragm relaxes, it moves upward. That causes the open spaces that were open to close. Any air that was in the space is going to be pushed out and is going to follow the reverse path that it followed on the way in. Now, the rate of inspiration and expiration is controlled by your brain based on your body's need for oxygen, which explains why when we exercise and need more oxygen, we breathe faster. Our bodies sense that we're exercising, we're burning more calories, we're burning more sugars. So to do that, if you've studied cellular respiration, if you haven't, I suggest watching a podcast on cellular respiration that I have. You know that the body's going to need that oxygen. The brain senses that and says, okay, lungs, we need more oxygen. So your breathing rate starts to increase, and you try to get more air. Same with yawning. When you're yawning, your brain is telling your body you need more oxygen, which is a sign of being tired. Okay? Now, or it's a symptom of being tired, however you want to mention that. Anyway, the last thing I want to mention is breathing is one of those unique things that is under both conscious and unconscious control. We don't have to think, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Oh, look, pretty good. Right? We don't have to think about breathing. We breathe automatically. However, if we think about breathing, we can control it, because we can go, holding your breath. I'm going to turn blue in a minute. Don't do this at home. I'm a professional. Right? So we can control our own breathing. Here's the point. Monitoring your own breathing is very difficult, because if you try to count the number of breaths you do in a minute, you end up breathing the number of times you count in a minute, which is not a breathing rate so much as it is counting. Okay? So when you're monitoring breathing rate, it's always good to have someone else do that for you, because, again, thinking about it is going to change how you breathe, because, again, it's under conscious and unconscious control. As a matter of fact, if somebody's monitoring your breathing rate, hopefully they're doing it without telling you they're doing it, because if you're telling you you're doing it, you're going to either try to slow down or speed up, depending on what your brain's telling you to do. All right? So let's take this home. What are the structures involved in breathing? Well, we have the mouth and the nose, right? The epiglottis covers the trachea. The opening of the trachea is in the pharynx, which is where the air from the nose and the mouth meet. Okay? It goes past the larynx, the voice box, which makes vibrations to make sound. It goes down the trachea into the bronchi, which split into the right and left lung. Bronchi branch into bronchioles, and bronchioles dead end into alveolar sacs, which are surrounded by capillaries. Capillaries bring blood and oxygen, and carbon dioxide are exchanged. Oxygen goes into the blood, carbon dioxide comes out of the blood. Then the blood goes to the heart and goes around in the body. That's internal respiration when it goes around the body, but it's external respiration when it's in the lungs. External respiration in the lungs, internal expiration everywhere else. All right? Inspiration is the process of taking air in. It's done by a passive process using a vacuum, meaning that the diaphragm contracts and air flows in. Then when we relax, the lungs collapse. That's expiration. Now let me look at the objectives and see what else we need to do. Hey, that's it. We did it. All right. Now, you will notice that the name of this podcast is a little different than normal. This is 242A. This is the respiratory system. The next one is a very special podcast or video lecture in which we will be going over the structures in a fetal pig. So we're going to be doing, we're doing paired lectures this time. I'll be doing an overview lecture, and then there will be an accompanying dissection lecture that goes with it. All right. I hope this helps you out. And if you have more questions, talk to me or visit MrDocsOnlineLab.com, and I will see you in the lab. And remember, we will cut a pig.